Welcome back to Dan on Dev. I've been talking about why all AppSec products suck, and as I've gone through the series, I've teased the idea that I was going to have a roundtable of experts to really kind of discuss and debate. It didn't end up being a roundtable. I ended up having separate conversations, and so I've got a few that I'm going to be releasing. This is going to be part one of why all AppSec experts suck, and this one here is with Michael Birch from Security Journey. So enjoy. All right. Well, we're here now with Michael Birch, and he's coming to us from Security Journey. So, Michael, I'm going to give you a chance just to do your own quick intro. You know how this goes. Take it away.
Yeah, so I'm the director of application security over at Security Journey, kind of lead the content creation we do for building secure development practices for developers, right? We teach developers how to do secure coding. And I'm huge in the AppSec space. Been here for a few years, do a lot of conference talks, and love getting on and debating security with people.
Awesome. Well, some of the stuff we were talking about, your what you guys do in teaching secure coding. I didn't. Maybe I have to do yet another addendum. I just actually did an addendum for the bug bounties, so that'll be releasing that here soon because I kind of left them out. But secure coding, I will say, just from my own point of view, it is essential. Like that, and I hate that I left it out, but it is. We can't fix AppSec without teaching developers, and I really do wish that programmers, it was just a built into almost every development, software development class or whatever, that there was a secure coding component to it. Because even if you were to teach them and teach them well, and they did everything right, you're still going to have security issues, but we'd have a lot less, right? Because there's some things that are very difficult. So yeah, we make it too easy by just teaching developers how to write code and not how to write it well. So I actually have a series that I put together that we'll have to talk about at some point, but it's actually around this. I was actually building this out for Cyber Patriots. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
Yeah, I've heard of them.
Yeah, I wanted to build this out, and it's basically content around teaching them. So I'll back up. I've had a lot of Cyber Patriots interns that I've helped over the years. There's a local tech school near me, and I kind of partnered up with them. And so for several years, I had their students coming in, and they don't really have much programming background. So I actually set them to task and have them build an application. I usually tell them, like, go build me a shopping cart site, for something, whatever their interest was, right? Like one guy is like into guitars, so he created a guitar site, right? And, another one was just a normal storefront, whatever. And I would tell them, okay, go build a page to, show the list of products, and then give me an individual product, right? The whole thing. You build a whole shopping cart, and then I would go and just tear it apart, right? Because of course they're just looking at how-tos. They put in, a SQL statement, whatever. They put a database together, tear it apart. Okay, put a product review page on there. Certainly end up doing it, cross-site scripting vulns everywhere, and I just tear them apart on it. And so I actually started, and I actually have some of it. I'll have to show you at some point, but I actually took ChatGPT and used that as my student, and the pages it was generating was exactly the same things my students were doing. And so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna record this out. It's coming. But I'm gonna use the ChatGPT as my intern and show exactly how this pre-generated code is so vulnerable, and that'll be fun.
That's a huge topic. Actually, it's funny you nailed that because there's a lot of conversations I've been having with a lot of people about secure coding, and then ChatGPT was not built to be secure coding.
No, because it's sourcing the material just like the human would, right? I mean, it's sourcing insecure content, right, or insecure coding examples. So that's just how it goes. Okay, well, on to the topic. We're here to talk about why all AppSec products suck. I haven't really talked to you much at all about what you thought about the series, but you did take the time to watch it all, so I appreciate that. And I'm really interested to get your take on the products, or on the whole series. So maybe you can just give me, like, overall, was it an interesting premise that I came at it with and opened up some thinking, or were you like, oh, Dan's full of crap?
Well, so I love the clickbait, right? I love the fact that the first thing that draw me in is like the abstract tools suck, and I'm a security training guy, and so I was like, yeah, you're right. I want to click on this and see what you have to say, right? So you scoop me in quick. I love the breadth that we covered, all these different kind of tools that people think are kind of what I would call the security tool chain, right? All these tools that we link together to create a better like security atmosphere. And so you touched on pretty much all the big ones that are involved in that security chain. But not just the absolute, like, not they just suck, but like, hey, this is why they're bad, this is why they're good, and vendor agnostic, here's how you can use it. Like that was a really powerful way to kind of convey those ideas.
Well, appreciate that. Okay, well, so that's good. So now I'm relaxed a little bit. Got me my guard down. So, yeah, I'm curious. I think you had mentioned something about the SaaS products and kind of your own point of view on the SaaS products. Maybe we'll kind of run through the list a little. But I'd be curious, what did you think about the SaaS side of things, and how do you tend to recommend usage of SaaS in your environments?
So SAST for me, SAST I almost falls off the idea of a security tool for me, which is funny because I say that because I actually teach about SAST, DAST, and IAST within like our platform and like talks and other things, right? But the thing with SAST for me, it's kind of like I put in the same category as a formatter, right? It's something that should be installed in my IDE and run every time I hit the save button. I shouldn't even have to think about it, right? My formatter automatically formats my code, makes it looks clean, pretty easy for other people to review, very consistent, right? SaaS tools are the same way. Like every single developer should have a SaaS tool installed in their IDE for the language that they're working on that should automatically run every time they save, right? It's just part of your development process. It's not really an additional security feature. This is just something that you should do. It's like brushing your teeth, right? You do it every day. Every time you save, this should just run, and you shouldn't have to think about it.
Yeah, so and I agree. Like that, if it was used in that model, and I might have mentioned this on one of the videos, and I've been saying this for over a decade now. Security issues are a bug, right? And a bug is a bug is a bug. So if this is a bug squashing tool that may also identify some security issues, that's the better way to look at it, as opposed to being just a security audit tool. And in that model, I think they're fantastic, right? It's when people rely on that as their like security compliance or security tool, I think is where it tends to fall down, and people tend to use it inappropriately, or at least not to its full advantage, and basically set it up for failure, right? Where they're just using it at the end of their pipeline or whatever. That's where it's generally set up for failure. But I love that. It's a good way of looking at it. Yeah. Anything else on the SaaS side, or anything else that you like caught? Yeah, you mentioned the breadth and depth issue.
So with SaaS tools, kind of the thing we touched on there too, and you kind of mentioned it, right? One of the hardest part with SaaS tools though is there's a bunch of vendors that are out there that they try to be the catch-all for everything there is in security, right? We provide the SaaS, DAST, IAST for every language out there in tech. You just install us once and we'll do it all. You're trying to use a Swiss Army, or you're making a Swiss Army knife out of your tool where I need a scalpel to work on my Java code for my very specific use case, and I need to make sure you're doing it really, really well, because maybe I'm doing something that's mission critical for my application. I will need to make sure that the tools I'm using are hyper tuned to do that job really well, and I don't think that the catch-all tools are going to do that, because they're, like you said before, their concern isn't to make your Python code the most secure. What they're thinking is like, I need the most amount of customers, and the most amount of customers I get by adding the most amount of languages, right? So the faster I can do that, the better I'm going to be in the market space, and that's their true motivation. So I would always prefer, if I have a SaaS tool, one that's been very specifically made for my language, community tested, like something that's like maybe even open source. And the reason I love open source, now once again, open source, there's some caveats to that too, right? Open source, you're going to lose maybe some of the funding that might back up a good quality tool. But at least I have a strong feeling behind the open source project that the true motivation is truly to be really good in my one language, to do my one thing, not necessarily monetarily motivated, right?
Yeah, that does make it's interesting, because I had this conversation with another one of the guests around the breadth and depth issue, and it is difficult sometimes because as an organization, if you're a smaller shop, it's easy to say, okay, well, let's say we're all going to write in Java, and then you would find a scalpel for Java, right, for being either the testing or the protection side, right, the defensive side or the offensive side. But if you're a larger organization, that's very difficult when you may have acquisitions and you got tons of languages that are homegrown plus acquired in. You've got a mess of technologies that make it really, really difficult to have like, a dozen tools in there for every different language, and trying to maintain and manage those gets to be really difficult.
So I think some of the balance though is in what we call, instead of looking at like the kind of way you broke down a tool at a time, right? Like, hey, look at all the SaaS tools, look at all the DAST, and it's really, when you think about this, how do you solve that problem is what's the tool chain look like, right? Because like I think we said before, if you just use DAST and you don't do anything else, any of these other tools, you're going to fail because you're using one tool and now you have one point of failure for all vulnerabilities to get through. And DAST or IAST or SAST, they do one thing really well, but they don't do good in the other areas, right? So like in my perfect world in this tool chain, right, I'm a Java developer. I'm sitting at my computer. I know I have the Java plugin SaaS tool that's going to scan my code as I write it live, right? But once it pushes up, maybe there's a larger DAST tool that's more language agnostic, that's running across the whole company, right? So we've created layers that are specific in the places we need it, but more broad in areas where we have to run it across the entire organization, right? So that we're creating those layers of abstraction that it no longer matters what language I get to. And the funny part is the way you lined it up, starting with SaaS, well, that's very specific for what I'm doing right now, right? But you go all the way to the end of this to like pen testing, right? They don't necessarily have to care what language you wrote it in at all, right? Like, so you've completely abstracted from the, like, all right, language matters. It kind of matters at DAST. Now you get instrumentation. So it's maybe like, it still really matters because it has to be hyper built for that type of instrumentation when you're talking IAST and RAST type agents. But then you go all the way to the end and we're at a pen tester who's like, I don't care what you wrote it in. I'm going to go break it, right? So it's kind of interesting as you build the layers approach. It doesn't matter necessarily the farther you abstract away if you have the depth, right? But in something like the SaaS tool, I feel like it does matter. Like that's the place that if you're going to make it hyper focused, take that time to make it hyper focused.
Well, and it's interesting. As you hyper focus and you have less languages, you definitely complicate yourself. And that's one thing I actually liked about working on DAST for all these years is, by and large, I didn't care. Well, okay, I will say up until the last 4 or 5 years, really. DAST was largely built on, I don't care what's behind the scenes, right? But as applications have evolved very dramatically in the last 4 or 5 years, they were trickling in, but the last 4 or 5 years has been just a sea change where, we used to think, oh, like these, there's these single page app. It was kind of, hit here and there. Now that's all there is, right? Like it feels like every new app is like React based or whatever. These apps are just, they're single page apps by default almost. And now you're forcing the DAST to have to think about the language and the frameworks and all that because there's so much client side activity. Yes, it's all JavaScript, but these frameworks are massive and they're beasts of their own to try to understand. And I remember when we first hit it was React. React has like its shadow DOM, right? And that, like when we first started crawling React sites, we're used to like look through the DOM, try to find all of the elements with events on them, and then trigger the event to see what would happen, right? And that was kind of the model we operated under. And that largely worked just fine. But then all of a sudden React has the shadow DOM and there's like one event on the document body. And we click on it and like nothing was happening. And we're like, where's all the rest of the events? Well, it turns out, it has its own. So they had to learn how to process the shadow DOM to try to get back to the original elements to trigger them, and it just kept going from there. Each framework was adding new complexity. So even the DAST, who, we all thought we were immune to having to worry about languages and frameworks, got sucked up in it eventually, which I didn't even mention in that episode, but. You just kind of triggered that thought. So that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that like as we progress too, I think the one thing you called out too, like IaaS is like one of the way of the futures for this stuff, right? Especially when you start leveraging it with DAST, right? The idea of attacking while watching the inside data to have that comprehensive look. Because I think that part of that helps. I know DAST is hard now. The single page apps make everything a little more difficult. Even microservices too, right? Like we're breaking up into smaller components, and now we have to change our technique. We can't just have a big shotgun that's going to hit everything. We have to segment it out and take a little bit more time. I will say the biggest thing I would say from all these tools, the biggest like heartache I think for the developer community is false positives, right? The biggest heartache for security community, false negatives, right? So on the opposite end of that, but the definitely the biggest problem I think from us is that just the instrumenting your tools properly. Because I think one of the hardest part with people that grab these tools and they throw them in, like, oh my gosh, I have so much noise. This tool is useless. I'm like, well, wait a minute. You need to cultivate this tool for your environment if you're going to use it, right? You can't just there's nothing out there that's just plug and play and going to give you all the answers, right? Every one of these tools you're going to have to instrument for your environment to make sure it works properly and that it's customized for your needs. Because if you don't, you're just going to have a bunch of angry developers with a bunch of false positives they're not going to want to do anything with.
Yeah, I get frustrated with the vendors who are like, oh, we're false positive free. Like, either if you're gonna be false positive free, then you're creating a lot of false negatives, right? So you got to have the trade off. There ought to be a proper balance, right? You don't want to have too many false positives because then there's too much noise to signal, right? And you're a waste as well, right? You're wasting people's time with all these false negatives, or false positives. But if you're not willing to accept that there's going to be a little give and take, and that's where I do think some vendors really hurt the conversation when they're like, oh, and we're going to give you the clean results. And now if you're going to have manual services do that, okay, now you might have a proper claim, right? If you're going to have a human backing up, but technology doing this, I mean, I've been trying to do this for 20 years, and it's not easy, and it's not a practical goal, really.
Yeah, it's not. And at some point, there has to be human interaction. It doesn't matter if it's a provided service or if it's at the level of the person running the tool. The fact is, somebody has to validate, right? Like that step has to be there, and you can't remove it. And if you remove it, saying, "Oh no, there's no false positive," then either, like you said, someone else is doing it for me, then, or your tool's not doing its job.
So I did an addendum on the bug bounties, and I didn't do that, but I'd be curious of what your thoughts are on the bug bounty model and how that factors into the space.
So bug bounties is an interesting concept. I love the premise of a bug bounty, but that's kind of I think the heavy security person in me that loves the idea that someone else would pay me to come mess with their code base and give them get rewarded for that, for breaking their environment. It all depends on how you run it, though, because there's not one, like, there's not one company runs a bug bounty and this is the only way it's done. The way that companies run bug bounties are far to the left and far to the right, right? One of my biggest things is that, like, there's the bug bounty programs where it's like la-di-da, anybody can contribute to, right? You find a bug, you submit to us, we'll give you a reward. But then there's a lot of places where you do that and you'll get sued because you didn't have permission to start off the thing, right? Like there's some more official ones that are like, yeah, we'll reward you, but you need to have like an agreement with us before you start breaking our stuff or even attacking our stuff, right? I think that leveraged in a right way, bug bounties are useful. And the nice part is if they are done and they actually incentivize properly, I do think that it does lend to have people that may be on the fence whether to turn in a bug bounty, the more likely to turn that in versus selling it to somebody else or using it in a different manner, right? So I think that's where the biggest bug bounty has its benefit, is that people are going to find bugs in your system. That's going to happen. People, malicious or not, are going to find bugs in your system. It makes sense to incentivize them to tell you about it rather than do something else with it.
Yeah, that's good. And I actually, you haven't seen the episode I recorded on it, so that's interesting because I hadn't thought about that model. I think they're interesting. I have some negatives about them because they are very uncontrollable, and they're an uncontrolled model. Whereas like pen testing, you can kind of control it. You're engaged with an individual or a company, and there's a small team that's focused on your thing. You can guide them on here's the areas I want to make sure you're checking. You may be able to seed them with some additional information. Whereas with a bug bounty, you don't know who's going to happen to pick up the work and how much, are they only focused on making a quick buck, so they're looking for the quick, easy wins, and maybe they're not going to spend the deep effort to find those more exotic issues that you really want to find out about. So there's that issue. But on the positive, I personally think it's amazing. It's an amazing community for up and comers, right? We talked a little bit before, before we started recording here about like our unconventional path into the space. And I think anybody that's been around for a while has a pretty unconventional path in, because there was no path. There was no, there's becoming a path more and more as we go. But the bug bounties is a good place for people to go cut their teeth, get some experience, build up a resume that they could, show their list of bounties they've turned in, and kind of establish some kind of career bona fides, right? So I think that's powerful for developing our industry. But I don't know if you thought about that end of it.
No, I hadn't really thought about that, but that's a really good point. From like the security practitioner side, once again, love the bug bounty idea because it's a great place for the up and coming and to make a name, and it gives you a chance to work for companies on projects you might not get hired to, right? So that's kind of an interesting aspect of it too. You could actually like work on you find a Apple bug bounty program and turn something into, right? Like coming right out the gate, getting a job with Apple might not be realistic. But if you get a bug bounty for them and then you have some credentials of something and if you find an Apple bug and get a bounty for it, that's going to matter to you on your resume, I promise, right? It's starting to build some real credibility. But as far as like for the companies, it's a safety net in my mind. It's not the solution, right? It's just, and to be honest, this kind of goes into my premise about most of these security tools, right? I think a lot of the vendors out there have the idea that security tools, including bug bounty programs, all these things, these are your solution. They're not. They're not the fix. They're the safety net. The fix is doing it right the first time, right? The fix is taking the time to learn and do whatever it involves, whether it's doing threat modeling before you start to actually develop your application, build good security controls, have a good plan in place, like all that stuff's your treatment, how to do this right. Everything after that, all these tools, SAST, DAST, IAST, bug bounties, pen testing, they're your safety nets. You should have a lot of safety nets, so use a lot of these and leverage them. But these are your backup plan, right? So that focus should be doing on right the first time and using these to catch when you kind of make the mistakes.
Yeah, which I guess goes to the point of the whole series, which is bug bounties, DAS, SAST. None of them are the solution, and that's really what I was trying to convey overall. That was my global point that I hope I was able to get communicated through, those first 8 episodes or whatever. Is that none of these are the solution. They are all a part of the solution. They are all tools in the toolbox that you need to draw from, understand where their strengths and weaknesses are. And so it sounds like we're probably meeting on that point and agreeing on that point pretty well, that this is, and I'm trying to figure out what the title of this talk is, or this episode. And I'm thinking it's like, why all AppSec experts suck. Because we all come up with this answer. We're like, yeah, I don't know. Try them all. Like that ends up being the end answer. But it sounds like we're kind of end up agreeing on that overall larger point, which is just the reality, I guess. Maybe that's why we agree on that point. Well, thank you, Michael, for joining. I really appreciate it. And hopefully I get a chance to be on your show, and we'll have some further conversation on this in this space.
Yeah, I super appreciate you having me on. Thanks for letting me kind of share my opinions in this tool space.
Well, that was awesome having Michael join me to discuss pretty much all of the product categories, get through all of it, talk about even the bug bounties. It was really amazing, and I really appreciated Michael's time. I hope that was helpful for you. And if it was, I would appreciate you clicking on subscribe, the like, all that sort of thing. We're continuing trying to build the channel. But thank you for your time, and this is Dan on Deck.